Be'ez Hashem, today's daf is daf Mem Gimel and Masechta Nazir. We're going to begin from daf Mem Beis and Beis, 3 lines from the bottom. Avo Mem Beis and Beis, Avo Tuma v'Tuma Loi. So to rediscuss what the Gemara is trying to solve is that there are 2 psukim over here, 2 psukim by the Nazir. 2 psukim, it says, one pasuk it says that al nefesh meis lo yavoi. He's not allowed to come into wherever there's a dead body. Presumably, if there's a dead body in a ohel hameis or in a room, so then the Nazir is not supposed to come in. He's not allowed to come into that room. And then the pasuk says he's for his mother or father, no matter who's dead, lo yitam lehem, he's not allowed to touch them. So he's not allowed to touch them. Now, what the Gemara is trying to determine over here is it possible that Hello, Lewis. Hi. We're just starting. Hi. We're just starting over here. Daf Mem Gimel in Masechta Nazir. So again, there's 2 psukim by a Nazir. One pasuk, the Torah tells us, al nefesh meis lo yavoi, that wherever there's a dead body, a Nazir is not allowed to walk into that room. That's lo yavoi. He can't come into that room, can't come into the ohel hameis. Then there's another pasuk that says lo yitameh lehem. He's not allowed to touch the dead body. He's not allowed to touch the dead body. So what the Gemara is trying to discover over here is, how is it possible for a Nazir to get both lavim? That means he at one time touches and comes into the room of a dead body and gets both lavim, lo yavoi and lo yatamo. How is it possible to get 2 lavim? Because if, let's say, a person touches one body, if a Nazir touches one body, he's tameh. So now what is he going to get? Another malchus by touching another body? So certainly he's not going to get 2 malchus. So what the Gemara is trying to understand is if he let's say he touched a body and is holding a body on his shoulder and walks into a room where there's another dead body, or this dead body is now in a room, so he's not going to get the issue of lo yavoi because he's already tameh. So the Gemara is trying to discover, how could you get 2 lavim, lo yitameh and lo yavoi, with one dead body? Avatuma v'tuma loy. Mem beis on base, 3 lines from the bottom. It's possible that if you touch one dead body and then you touch another dead body at the same time, lo, you don't get malchus. Why? Because once you touch one dead body, you're already tameh. So you're not going to get another malchus, a Nazir, you're not going to give a Nazir another malchus just because he touched another dead body. He's already tameh. So the Gemara's question is, Tuma ubiyanami. So then how do you have a situation where a Nazir is tameh and then walks into the ohel hameis where there's a dead body there? He's already tameh. He touched the dead body, and now he walks into the ohel hameis. So you want to give him another malchus? He didn't do anything more to his kedushas Nazir. He already became tameh. So why are you going to give him another malchus? Is as a tameh Nazir, he walked into the room where there's a mace there. Amar Rabbi Yochanan says, "Kan babayis, kan basodeh." So what this means is like this: if he went into a house when there's a bias, that where there's a mace inside of it at the same time. So it seems Rabbi Yochanan saying that as soon as you walked into the house, let's say he's a tahar, okay? He's a tahar person. He wasn't tameh. And then he walked into the house that had a dead body there. So now you get 2 averos at the same time. So lo yatama and lo yavoi. Lo yavoi because you walked into the room with the dead body, and lo yatama, you're making yourself tameh because the dead body, and you're in the room with the dead person, and it's as if you touched it. Kan basodeh. When do we say that you don't get 2 malchus? Is if you touched the dead body in the field and then you walked into the room. Then you walked into a room where there's a mace there. Then you don't get 2 malchus. Cool. So now the Gemara doesn't understand. We go to the top of Mem Gimel Amar Aleph. You're telling me that if a Nazir walks into a room where there's a dead body, he gets two malchus? He's a tar Nazir. He walked into a room with a dead body, he gets two malchus? Wait a second. But bias nami, let's figure this out with the house. Cave in the oil yade, when a person sticks his hand into the room, right? When the Nazir stuck his hand into the room, ista'av, he became tameh. Now, ki ayel kula hai, when ki ayel kule, when he now walks into the room following his hand, he already was tameh because he stuck his hand into the room. Now that he put his whole body into the room, he's already tameh. So why will I give him malchus for the loyove not coming into the room? He's already tameh. It's only a nazir that comes into a room, but here he's already tameh. Ella Omar Ablaza says, you're right. Seirif Yodai, if he stuck his hand out, Mishum Tuma Ika, Mishum Bia Leka. When a person sticks his hand out into the room, he already is tameh. Mishum Bia Leka. Then he's not chayev for coming into the room of a dead body because he's already tameh. But Seirif Gufa, but let's say he stuck his hand and he didn't stick his hand. He put his hands on the side of where his pockets are. So, and then he walked into the oil amaze. That the lava don't become tameh and don't go into a room that has a mace in it, come at the same time. So again, here the Gemara is giving a teretz. How is it possible to be over the lav of lo yavai and lo yatama at the same time? For Nazir, don't go into a room with the dead body and don't be matami yourself. If he walked into a room without sticking his hand sticking his hand first, stretched out, but he walked into his room at the same time, all this don't become tameh and don't walk into a room happen at the same time, and you would get two malchus. So the Gemara says that's not true. When you walk into a room, what enters the room first? Your nose. So when he stuck his nose into the room, the nazir became tameh. Now that he stuck his whole body, he's already a tameh nazir. So how could you give him a malchus again for lo yavai? He's not a tar nazir. He's a tameh nazir that ran into the room. So the Gemara says, okay, let's say he didn't walk in with his nose first. He turned his head around. Elam hichnis yadei mishum tuma ika mishum biyaleke. Hichnis gufai tuma obiya bahadei doin ka'asim. If he just went in with his body, without sticking any protrusion from his body out, he just walked in, sticking his head to the side. So when he walked into the room, at the same time without being a tamei nazir. So that's why he gets two malchus. So the Gemara says that's also impossible. It's impossible for him not to have stuck his foot into the room and then stick his body into the room. How do you walk into a room? You walking into a room. So what enters the room first? Your foot. When the nazir's foot enters the room, the nazir became tamei. Now, because and then the Torah says, lo yavoi, don't bring your entire body into the room. So, but you're already a tamei nazir. So how are you going to give him two malchus? He's already a tamei person. The Torah only gives malchus for a tar nazir, a nazir tar that enters a room. But as soon as he stuck his foot into the room, he's already a tamei nazir. So why are you going to give him another malchus of lo yavoi? Ella Amara Papa. Here's the teretz. Very interesting teretz. How do we solve this dilemma that you get a human being, a nazir tar, into a room, and at the same time he's in the room and turning to the mace? So therefore, you're going to give him two malchus. The Gemara gives two terutzim. One teretz is kigoin. What's the teretz? Kigoin shenichnas b'shida teva migdal. He went in with like a closet, like imagine a stationary closet. And he went in with a stationary closet into a room. All right. He went into a room. The kohen imagine the nazir is in a box, in like a stationary, the IKEA closets that they have. And it's you build them and it's movable. And they brought him into the oil mace where there's a dead body into that room. And his friend just lifted the top off, and he probably pushed the roof off the off the closet. So now the Nazir became Tameh, and he's in a room with a dead body in it. It came at the same time. That's the situation. A Nazir will get two malchus, one for Lo Yitama and one for Lo Yavoy. That's how the Gemara solves the dilemma. And then the Gemara solves the dilemma with one more possibility. And that's going to be the subject of the rest of the daf, which will very short daf today. Ma Baravashi Omar. Ma Baravashi says, Kegoin, the oil tissue geises. A Nazir went into the room where a guy was on his bed dying. He didn't die yet. Unafak nishmasei ad Yosef. And while the Nazir was there, the guy died. So the Tuma Ubiya Bahade Adon Ke'asin. So therefore he became Tameh, and he's in the room of a dead body, came at the same time, and that's why you get two lavin. And although since it happened at the same time, you get two lavin, and he gets two malchus at the same time, even though they warned him, they're going to whack him 80 times. And the fact that he walked into that room, that's the maisa, the action that he did, even though the action occurred before the guy died, the Nazir is going to get two malchuses for being in that room where this dying person died. The Gemara now discusses what is the story with a dying person, a person that's on his deathbed. And that relates to two areas in halacha. One, with a Nazir, does a Nazir can a Nazir be in the room with a man that's dying but not yet dead? Or a Kohen, can a Kohen be in a room with a man who's dying and not yet dead? So this is the discussion for the rest of the daf. Tanarabanim, lehei chaloi. A Kohen is not allowed to meet. The Torah tells us a Kohen is not allowed to meet tama to a mace. Lehei chaloi, because it will make him profane. So we darshan achio shiyamus. That means the Tanakama holds that the Kohen, there's only a problem for a Kohen to be in that room only after the guy dies. But prior to the death of the person, the Kohen could be in that room. So that's the simple reading of the Tanakama. Rebbe says something, b'maisam. It says by a Nazir, a Nazir is not allowed to touch the dead body of his father or mother or his brother or sister, b'maisam, after they died. So Rebbe says, same idea, b'maisam, Yitamu Achiyamas. Up until they die, you can touch them. After they die, that's the problem. You're not allowed to touch them after they die. So the Gemara says, "My Beinayu." What's the difference between the Tanakama and Rebbe? Both seem to say that a dying person is permitted to be in the room with a Kohen and a Nazir. So what is the difference between the Tanakama and Rebbe? Amar Rabbi Yochanan, Mashma'us Darshan Ika Benayu. It's the way you darshan psukim. Where do you know that a Nazir is only restricted only after the person is dead, or a Kohen is restricted only after the person has died? That's how you learn it from different psukim. Is it from lehei chaloi or is it from b'maisam? But they both teach you the same idea. But Rish Lakish says goises ika benayu. Wow, that there's a difference between the Tanakama and Rebbe, where a guy who's on his deathbed. Laman the Amam Lehechaloi, from the person that darshans Lehechaloi, afilu goises. He says that Kohen and Nazir are not allowed to be in the room where a guy who's on his deathbed, not yet dead, but he's not allowed to be in the room with a guy who's a goises. That's called a goises, a dying person. And that's the Tanakama, very restrictive. Laman the Amam b'maisam, but according to Rebbe, if the Torah says they have to be dead, Achiyamus and Goises loy. Until they actually die, they are permitted to be in the room, a Nazir and a Kohen. But only Achiyamus and. In other words, the Isser is only after they die. Goises loy. Goises is not permitted. Okay? So basically, we have a different girsa. But according to the Mandiyama of B'maisam, it means only if they died, actually. But if they're a goises, then they are permitted to be in that room. So again, Hechaloi teaches us that even if they're a goises, even if the guy is a goises, a dying person, a Nazir and a Kohen cannot be in that room. So the Gemara says, Ulaman diyama mehechaloi. According to the opinion, it says lehechaloi. And they touch the word leichaloi means a guy whose soul is being emptied. It's not empty yet. That's usher. Haksib b'maisam. But doesn't the Torah say they have to be actually dead? So the Gemara says, "Bi boyalei likid Rebbe." That uses that pasuk what Rebbe used the pasuk for. The Tanya we learned in a brisa. Rebbe says a nazir. It says you're not allowed to touch a person that's dead. B'maisam ein mitame. He's not allowed to touch his relative when he's dead. Aval mitame b'nigasam uvizivasam. You're allowed to touch your relative if they are a Mitzaira or they have another Tumah, a Tumah Ziba on them. You see, a Nazir is prohibited from touching an actual dead corpse of a relative. But if their relative is only, has another Tumah on them, there's no Isser for him to touch them. He just goes to the mikvah. Maybe it's only by a relative. Maybe he's not allowed to be Mitama to any person that is a Mitzaira or a Ziva. That's the way the Rush learns, that the Nazir, which you probably never heard of, Nazir is prohibited from even touching any Mitzaira or a Zava, but not if his relative has a Nega or is a Ziva. Okay, that's what he learns. Ulaman diyama b'maisam. So the Gemara asks, if that's what b'maisam is teaching you, hamabayle lahai savara. I needed to teach you this idea of what? That the Nazir is only prohibited from touching dead bodies, but not other tumas. So he needs b'moisam. So where does he learn that idea from? The Gemara says he learns two ideas from the word b'moisam. One idea that you learn from b'moisam means that the guy has to be actually dead, not dying, but he has to be dead. And then from the extra mem, it came lemakra b'mois. Let the Torah just say the word b'mois, that the person is dead. My b'moisom, in their death, shemat minei tarti. You see two ideas, and you see the second idea that only the Nazir is restricted only for touching a dead body or a tamei mace, but he's not restricted from touching another person that just has another tumah on it, a mitzora or a zava on it. And same idea applies to a kohen. A kohen is not allowed to touch a dead body, but he is permitted to touch another mitzayra or a zav. That's what he learns from b'maisa. Now the Gemara asks back, according to the opinion who says that what's restricted for a kohen in the Nazir only if they're actually dead. But doesn't the pasuk says lehech haloi, don't touch a body that's being emptied of its soul. So that means that the guy's not yet dead yet. So it seems to be that the Kohen and Nazir are not allowed to even touch a dying person or be in the room with a dying person. And says the Gemara, that comes for another teaching. That teaches you another teaching, that a Kohen is only restricted from being Metame himself if he's a Kohen Tar. Well, let's say he's already a Kohen Tameh. Well, let's say a Nazir is already a Nazir Tameh. Then there's no restriction on them to be Metame themselves. Only if it's a Tameh that causes them to become profaned. But if they don't become profane because they're profaned already, because the Hechaloi means they're profane, then there's no restriction on them. So that's why, according to the Mandiyama that has b'maisam, that's what lehechaloi is teaching. So the Gemara says, the Aksbat, Mandiyama lehechaloi, homiboile lahai svara. We need it. According to the Mandiyama of lehechaloi, I still need the hechaloi to teach you that teaching of that you can't become tamei twice. A kohen has the only iser only if he's tamei, only if he's tar. But if he's already tamei, then there's no iser for him to be metama to a mace. So I need the hechaloi to teach you that teaching. How do I know it's teaching you the teaching that the kohen is restricted even for somebody who's dying, who's not yet emptied his soul? So the Gemara says you see two teachings, according to that opinion, you see two teachings from the word leichaloi. In came lemikra lahachel. Let the Torah only write lahachel. You're not allowed to touch an empty body. As a soul is dying, you can't touch it. My lehechaloi. Why does the Torah add the extra vav? Shamat minei tarte. You see two things from it. One, that he's not allowed to touch a goyses, And number two is he could only be mitama him. The only isser is to touch it, to mitama himself once. But once he's already tameh, he's already profane, then there's no isser for the nazir or kohen to be mitama themselves again. Okay, so one last question on this topic. Again, we found here, according to Reb Shlokish, that there's a machlokes between Tanakama and Rebbe if a kohen and a nazir are restricted to go into a room where there's a guy who's on his deathbed. Tanakama says yes. Rebbe says no. They actually have to be dead. So the Gemara asks the question. Meisvi, I'll ask you a question. The Brisa says, "Adam eina metame ela acha teitze nafshe." The pasuk says that the Brisa says of Adam is not metame until he dies. Va'afilu meguyad, even if he's chopped up and he's about to die. Va'afilu goises, even if he's like in a coma or something like that, he doesn't metame lameis. So pashtus, he doesn't make the room tamei. But according to the opinion, it says lahechaloi. But isn't this Brisa says that the goises doesn't even make the room tamei? So what should be a problem for a kohen to be in that room if the goises, the dying person, is not going to make the room tamei? So the Gemara says you're right. Le'inyan tamuye adanaf genafshe. To be mitame the room, to be mitame the kalim in the room. Yes, the dead person has to die. Before he dies, nothing in the room becomes tamei. But the kohen still can't enter the room. To make a kohen profane, a kohen will be profane being even in that room with a dying person. That's the opinion of the Tanakama. So even though it's not going to be metame until later. Now we go to Amid Beis and a new topic. But this is a very important topic, and this will a few minutes, and then we'll stop. The question is, a kohen is allowed to and permitted and should attend his parents' funeral. He's allowed to be in the Shomrei Hadas and attend the funeral. But now the Gemara gives you a restriction you probably never heard. Ama Rav Chizda Ama Rav. Rav Chizda said in the Rei Rav, let's say the kohen's father was in a car accident and his head got severed from the body. So now he's in the box, he's in the coffin, his head and the body are in the coffin. So Rav said, Nikta Roishe, if the head of the father shall aviv, if the head of the father was severed, the kohen cannot attend that funeral. He's not allowed to be in the same room. My Tama, what's the reason of Rav? Amakra, because the pasuk says that when does the pasuk give a kohen the right to attend his father's funeral is la'aviv, if the father's completely intact. Bizman shuhu shalem, unless the father is completely in one piece. Let's say he died in a certain way where his body parts are severed from the original body, then it's he can't attend that funeral. I think this is the halacha also. Okay, that's the halacha. They asked Rabbi Feinstein, what happens if this happens? Let's say they removed the kidney from the father. Is that while he was alive? First of all, when he was alive, that's not the problem. But even if you want to say that removing a kidney, he said that's on the inside of the body, and therefore the father is not complete. Here we're talking about when you see the body parts are separate, then the kohen cannot be mitama. He cannot attend the funeral of his father. Amalei Rav Hamnuna. Rav Hamnuna asked the question, what do you mean? If you're saying that a father's head never got severed from the body, the son cannot attend the funeral and cannot be involved in burying his father, well, let's say the father also bapakta the Aravis. Let's say he was going in a valley of Aravis. Well, let's say somewhere in Mexico, where upasake ganave reshe, and they knocked his head off. The ganovim chopped his head off. You can tell the son, oh, don't bury your father. So why not? I mean, it seems that the father is all by himself and nobody's going to bury him. Amalei, so Rav Chizda answered Rav Hanuna, Meis mitzvah ka'amret. You're telling me a meis mitzvah when there's nobody else to bury it. A kohen is allowed to be mitama to a meis mitzvah where there's nobody else burying it. Yes, then we tell the kohen, you be the one to burying it. certainly be other like Kolshke. If it's his father is the Mace Mitzvah, his father is the only one and he's the only one that can bury his father, and there's nobody else around, certainly the son has to bury the father. So the Gemara, is that considered burying the father, a Mace Mitzvah? In this situation, how did they contact the son? The same way they contacted the son, they could have contacted somebody else to bury the father. But Tanya, we learned in the Brisa, Ezehu Mace Mitzvah. What's considered a Mace Mitzvah? Kol she'ein like koven. That there's nobody around to bury this guy. Let's say you're walking in the desert and the kohen sees in the desert a dead body, he's allowed to bury the dead body there. But koire, if you can call somebody, you make a cell phone call, you could call the Chevra Kadisha and they could come. Ein zeh Mace Mitzvah. It's not a Mace Mitzvah. So here in this situation, when they chopped the father's head off, he's in Mexico, and they contacted the son, why should the son be the one to go bury him? Maybe the son should call the Chevra Kadisha, and they should call the Chevra Kadisha and bury it. Well, Islay Bra, the same way they contacted the son, they can contact somebody else, and the son should hire somebody else to bury the father. Answers the Gemara, Kaven the Ka'oz Barucha, since the father is on the road, and therefore it's very hard to hire somebody to bury on the road. The Chevra Kadisha will say, we only bury people who die in the city, but try to get us to go there. We're not going there. It's like getting a tow truck out in the boondocks. You can't. So therefore, he's on the road, and it's the father basically all by himself. So the son, if he wants to hire somebody, he's going to have to, make up hire random people. So it's kamisha ein like kavrim dami. It's as if the father had no one to bury him. In that scenario, the son can bury the father. Back to the topic, and this is one question and one answer. The question that Rav said, Anu did. If father is in the box and his head is severed from his body, the son Kohen cannot bury him, cannot be involved in the funeral. So the Brisa seems to disagree. Lo yitama. The Brisa says that the pasuk says a Kohen can be matama for his sister. He can bury his sister. Lahu matama. Only for your sister you can bury. The ain't matama le'evarel. Let's say your sister's alive, but she lost loyalenu. They chopped her hand off. So then the Kohen brother cannot bury that hand. Even if it was his own father, he would not be able to bury that limb of his father. Certainly he can't bury the limb of his sister. But let's say the Brisa says, let's say you buried the father, and now he's tamei. He just buried his father, and then he realized that there's one bone of his father that they didn't bury. You could go back and take the bone that's the size of the barley and bring it back and rebury that bone to join the father. So, but how did he bury the father in the first place? The father was not complete. The father was missing a bone. So my machzahu aletzim kisoyer. What does it mean? You're allowed to go back and bury a bone. You missed the bone. You go back to the house and bring the bone of the father and bury it. Lav lememer, doesn't it imply that the father was missing parts of his body, and yet the Kohen was first allowed to bury his father and then go back to the house and pick up a bone that he forgot and bury that. So, but you just, Rav, said that if the father is not complete in the box, he's missing something, or even if his head is severed from his body, the Kohen is not allowed to attend that funeral, is not allowed to be involved in the Kavura. Answers the Gemara, Ahi Rabbi Hudi. You're right. Rav went according to the opinion of the Rabbanan, and the Rabbanan hold that if the father is missing one part of his body, or his father has the whole body but it's not intact, then the son Kohen cannot bury the father. But Rabbi Yehuda disagrees with that. Tanya, we learned in a Brisa. Rabbi Yehuda says, "Lo v'tama ve'mitama le'ivarea she'ina mitama le'ivim menachai shalaviv." Just to bury a hand of your father, or bury the hand of your sister, or leg loyalenu that they had to cut off in an operation, the son, the Kohen, cannot do that. Let's say your father, they buried the father, the son buried his father, and then forgot, his father had a hand, he forgot, or a part of his body that he forgot to bury along with his father. He's allowed to go back and bury the father, bury that hand or the limb of the father that he forgot. So we see from there that Yehuda is of the opinion that the Kohen is allowed to be metame to his father and bury his father, even though his father is not fully intact physically. He's missing part of his body. The son, the Kohen, could bury his father. But Rabbanan argue on that. Rabbanan hold that no, the Torah's heter for a Kohen to bury his father is only if the father is shalem, complete, and not if he's missing parts of his limb, or even just his nikta roishe, if his head was severed, then the son is not allowed to bury his father. We'll continue with this topic tomorrow, B'ez Hashem. V'atem b'dveikim b'Hashem chaim kulchem hayoim. Okay.